Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. This is Brian, joined by my co-host, Paul. We'd like to welcome you to a community meant for the men of the world to share their thoughts and perspectives on marriage. We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other be better husbands. This week on the pod, we want to talk to you about coming to terms with your imperfections. Do we actually have to do that? Is that even a thing? We'll explain more when we get in.
And before we jump all the way in, we'd just like to say thank you. If this is your first time, thanks for checking us out. If you've been rocking with us for a while, we appreciate you coming back. If you would like to get more in depth or leave any comments, you can search Marriage is Tougher on any social media channel. Also, if you'd like to be a guest, you can go to marriageisttougher.com, click the contact button, fill out the contact form with your information and what you'd like to talk about, and we will reach out to you and get you on the show. Again, you also can find all of our archive episodes there. So if there's anything you want to hear that we've done, it's there for you. We would really love to connect with you in any way. So please reach out. We want to have a community here. All right. Let's hop in the show.
So I've got plenty of imperfections. I can admit that. Should I come to terms with those imperfections? And what does that look like, I guess? Coming to terms with your imperfections, does that mean that I have to accept them? Or is it more or less I'm acknowledging them?
Coming to terms for me is acknowledgement, right? Because a lot of times we don't even want to acknowledge that we have imperfections. Like, God forbid, I can't do something or I'm not doing something well.
Yeah.
So to be able to acknowledge it really is the way to start to improve should you choose to take on that challenge. But I think we have to, as we talked about before, self-reflection a couple weeks ago. You have to be able to see what really is and not what you want to be. So acknowledging is where I would lean.
Yeah. I'd agree. I think acknowledge it can help start the process of improving, right? I don't like the idea of acceptance, although I think that also has to be a piece of it, right? You're acknowledging and accepting that this is a reality.
Yeah, accepting is different than owning.
Yes. There you go. That's a good way to put it. Because I feel like anything that we put our mind to, we can become better at it, right? We may not be the best at whatever the case, whatever the issue is out there, but we can certainly become better. And we can certainly have conversations with our wives about those imperfections, what imperfections she might be acknowledging. Maybe there are some that she's willing to accept. Maybe there are some that she has ideas on how you can improve. I think that's worth the conversation.
Absolutely. It's definitely because there are things that your wife will say that you didn't even consider, but when she says it, you're like, oh, yeah, I do need to, I do need to be better at this. So yeah, it's definitely good to invite your wife into that conversation, but I think make sure you have that with yourself first. So that way you won't feel attacked, right? Like if you come with a list already knowing you need to improve, right? Not just be like, I need to do this one thing. And then she comes, well, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you're like, wait, why are you attacking me? No, she just did a thorough thing. Right. So come with your list, a full list and a true list. Do your best. And I think that is a good baseline. And then invite your wife into that conversation.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. If there are things you feel your wife could improve upon, how do you bring that up within the same conversation without making it feel like it's a tit for tat or making it feel like you're not accepting of her perspective for your needed improvements?
I think the best way, and this is me just working through my brain right now, and you can say that's terrible. The best way would be have the conversation about yourself, start making improvements, and then bring it up as uh, a we can get stronger. And I've been working on these things. And have you seen them? Yes. And then, hey, is there anything that you feel you'd like to improve on that, that can help us grow as blah, blah, blah. Um,
Okay.
I think that's the softest way in my brain. If you have a better way, I'd say, you know, throw that out there. But I think that's one way I would do, because I would say a lot of wives are motivated by their husband's go get it approach and doing what they said they were going to do.
Mm,
Right. So if she sees you going after what you both agreed you need some work on, and you start going after it, that will spark interest. That'll, she'll be affected by that. And then to kind of come alongside with you, but in an area that she needs, now we're both striving for growth together. It might be different, but we're moving in the same direction.
yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like what I think Dr. John Deloney says, and I've been trying to put a lot more thought into practicing the words that need to occur to keep the space of a conversation safe for both parties, right? Because there's a lot of times where there's a communication that I'll need to make, and I am apprehensive about making said communication because I don't necessarily know how to string the words together where it doesn't feel like I'm attacking, right? And so, he will bring up the idea of using I statements, right? Like, I need to, I don't know. I'm struggling to come up with an example at the moment, but, you know, let's say I try to communicate to my wife that I don't feel safe about uh, talking to her on a specific topic, right? So you might say something along the lines of, you know, I'm struggling to feel safe in this space for, XYZ reason. Without putting that directly on her, you're basically saying that something needs to change. I don't feel safe for these reasons. Can you help me work through this? Right? Can you help me figure out a way where I can feel safe?
That's
And
good.
any caring wife is going to, more or less maybe take on that responsibility, but by not coming at her and saying, you did this doesn't make me feel safe, right? I think it's easier for her to accept looking at herself or, self reflection to see if that's something that she may have caused, or, um, if maybe her words are triggering things of that nature. Because I know that's also worked for me when my wife brings concerns to me and eases into it. It allows me to accept, number one, that she has an issue. Number two, look at myself and figure out if there's something specific that I've done. Do I have a history of doing this over time? You know, what is it that she is saying to me, and how can I be of help to make that change? I think it's always easier to almost look at it from like a bird's eye view. If I get called out on something, you did this. This is ridiculous. This can never happen again. I no longer have that bird's eye view. I'm right into this moment. I'm getting defensive, and I can no longer see the bigger picture, right? Like I can't see that she's hurting. I can't see that she's wanting, me or us or her to be better. All I feel is attacked. I'm in defensive mode, and you know, I understand that I choose what to do with those reactions, whether it be healthy or unhealthy. Um, but I know I have a history of locking down when something like that happens.
Yeah, words definitely matter. And the sooner we can figure that out and figure out what works in our marriages, the sooner that we can progress and grow. So I think that's definitely a key piece if you're looking to bring something up that you see that your wife is growing or is needing growth in. I think another way you can do that is in your as you're making your own list of things. You're like, hey, I'm thinking about making a list of things that, just doing some self reflection and I want to grow on, but I'm going to need, or I would desire that you help me in these areas. And you're someone I can give account to. Is that something you'd be interested in doing for yourself?
Hmm.
Um, and so before you even bring anything about yourself, kind of be like, it's an ideas project that you're both doing and can spark some conversation because that sets the precedence that one, obviously it's an option. Two, that you're looking to improve yourself and letting her in on your thought process.
Hmm.
And three, it's really a gauge on if at this moment she feels like that's a safe space for you guys in your marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So it could be great, but it could also lead to some challenging things. But at the same time, you're looking to grow right now anyway. So,
Right. 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 That brings up a good point. How do we normalize having these types of conversations? I've had this thought recently that maybe we should do some episodes on practicing these types of communications, right? Like, what are
hmm
the words that are best suited to start a conversation on whatever topic, right? I think putting some thought into that, and
hmm
as a man, practicing would help us bring these types of situations up with our wife rather than just, swallowing the hurt.
hmm
Um, but what are your thoughts on how to normalize these types of conversations, right? Like, I could see men out there being like, I'm not admitting that I don't feel safe with my wife. Like, what kind of fool do you take me for?
right. I think it's how do you get better at doing anything is doing the thing, right?
Mm,
So finding small things, right? Um, I think a good way to start is find something that your wife does better than you, that you both know she does better than you,
mhm.
and talk about that thing, right? Because that's already out in the open thing, right?
Yeah.
And that normalizes the conversation, not the topic, but the conversation, like the area. Like I need to be better at this. You hold the keys. You're better. You can teach me whatever, or you have thoughts, and that starts that conversation. And eventually, in those same areas, see how she speaks to you, right?
Hmm.
Log that away and try to use that same language back to her whenever you're talking about something, right? So it's like a research project. You're getting used to it, but you're also seeing how she conveys it, and then vice versa, right? Have another conversation, not not in a hey, you're not as good as this, but the next time you're actively doing something that you may be more attuned to, or it's your responsibility or it's your role that you can bring her in, try to do that or at least have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Or
Um,
or I said and you can always say in that space where you know it's something that you're better, like, hey, I'd like to share my process with you on, or my thought process or my actual process on how I do this thing. Um, and either be open to feedback or I just want to let you in on this thing. And then that's kind of, it's more just conversations about improving or processes or things that run well so that everyone is on the same page. And that can kind of help you. Well, we just have conversations about these things. So when something is out of place or not as good or needs improvement, we already talk about the processes that are in place.
that's good. That's good. I think there are times that men struggle with having those types of conversations because they're so used to putting forth this tough guy persona, right? And you have to realize that that tough guy persona within your marriage isn't getting you very far. So it warrants the practice of having these difficult conversations and these vulnerable conversations. And I think even for myself, I've felt those times where I've not wanted to feel vulnerable or weak. And I think what I've brought it back to is that sometimes I just don't have the words that make me feel like I am putting myself out there to get chopped up. You know what I mean? Because, man, like, let's just say you have to admit that you made a mistake, right? Nobody wants to do that. And then you have to admit that to the person that you care for the most,
Hmm.
right? You're admitting that this is something that you've done that will likely have hurt her. So I'm thinking two things right now. One, if she reacts in a manner that like it makes her angry and you get chopped up that way, or
Hmm.
she expresses how disappointed or hurt she is by the action, you get chopped up that way.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. That is the thing. That is the way my brain works. Anyway, is I'm gonna think that one of two, or actually, I think both happen. Right in my
Mhm.
brain, it's gonna be explosive, and then it's gonna be telling me how terrible of a person I am and how hurt I made her. Right.
Oh, don't let it be
Um,
both.
it's both in my brain, is what I'm saying. There's not an either
I hear
or,
you.
but the reality, it's usually neither. In my
Mhm.
experience, she's gracious enough to really ask the questions of why whatever happened happened.
Okay.
And it's more like, it's almost like she's having me understand my why and take accountability for it, and then have a plan to move forward so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. That's that's good.
That's what works for her. I don't know what, that's just my experience. It's the most intimate experience for me.
Yeah. I feel like that could work in a lot of situations, right? Because it's so different bringing it to the table versus it gets exposed and she finds out that whatever it is, right? Um, that maybe you've been keeping it from her, you've been afraid to, mention it, and by letting it go, it's damaged other pieces, right? Like when something is wrong, my wife's always like, "Hey, I could tell. Like, I know you. What's going on?" And maybe I don't want to talk about it. Maybe I don't want to admit what's going on. Whatever the case may be. But you have to imagine being given the opportunity to express yourself. You decide to hold it in, and then later on, she finds out what it is anyway. Like that's got to be worse every single time.
Oh,
So
100% of the time it's worse.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think building that muscle of admission to like, hey, I made a mistake. I'm human. I'm trying to be better. Right. And it's not just like, hey, this happened, deal with it. Right. Like we're making a conscious and honest decision or effort to be better. And
That
then
part.
letting her into the process as well, like you said.
Yeah, that's it. You have to come, and really it's like a lot of things, it's a pride thing, right? Why do we not want to admit, because we're prideful, like I shouldn't be making mistakes. I'm better than this. Like I should know it all,
Yeah.
right? We actively say that we don't know it all, and that because we don't know it all, like logically speaking, if we don't know it all, that means we're going to make mistakes. That means we're going to learn something new. And in learning, you make mistakes and you find the best way. In theory, in our mind, that makes sense. But then when we actively live out making mistakes, we're like, how could I have made this mistake? Like,
Mhm.
maybe that's me. I'm speaking for me. Maybe that's nobody else, but that's me. And that is
Yeah.
a prideful thing.
I think it's a little bit deeper in areas as well, because if we're calling it a mistake, that is, I would say, largely something that we may not have been aware of was a mistake, or, it's like the other end of it is those times we know something is wrong and consciously decide to do it anyway, right? For whatever reason. Let's say, you're trying to change a drinking habit, right? And at the time you're about to take a drink, you're like, man, I shouldn't be doing this. But for whatever reason, whether it be habit, whether it be addiction, right? We make the decision to go and move forward anyway. So I think those two things are different. And going back to the pride thing, it's for me, I feel like this is something I can fix on my own. And I also want to say, like, sometimes it's not just that I can fix it on my own, I can fix it on my own before it gets or becomes discovered. And then now
Yeah.
I've avoided the trouble. I've fixed the thing. But let me just tell you, that rarely happens
Right. That's the idea works out, and
in your head.
our wives are too astute. They're
Mhm.
too good of students of us to let that
Right,
happen. Like
right.
to go unnoticed. They might not say anything because either they're waiting for the right time or the Lord hasn't told them to say anything. So it is that space of, I mean, just imagine if you're thinking about anything else in life, right? If you are at a job, or you're working out, or you're working towards some goal, it generally is better when you come against problems to have two people's heads on those problems and two
Right.
people's heads on the solution, right? Even if one person is like the driver, if there's like another person that's like checking in and saying, hey, how'd that work, or have you thought about this, or whatever. And it's like we totally forget about that in marriage. Like for
Mm.
some reason we forget about that. And if we brought everything that we, and I'm not saying don't try to fix it, right?
Mhm.
I'm not saying you see it, fix it. Like, if you cut yourself on the door, you're not going to wait until your wife gets home and be like, help me do this, right? You're just going to take care of it. So I'm not saying something little. I'm saying if you are, you know, actively cutting your arm off and you need to go to the hospital, you don't have to drive yourself. Have your wife drive you. You know what I mean? So it's like making
Yeah.
sure you're doing inventory. Try to do the things that you can, but knowing that you at least you'd still have a conversation like, oh man, like I cut myself today, right? You wouldn't
Right.
just say, you know, I'm not going to tell you that I'm working on this thing. So just communicate. And now that we're saying it, I think that's a good thing is even when we're doing little things that we see as insignificant, still let your wife in and have a conversation about those, because those things don't pull on your heartstrings, right? So if you build that muscle of I can have this conversation when a big thing that may affect you, you've already built up one, the process of how to have the conversation, and two, the vulnerability of actually doing it and the consistency of doing it. And so that would make it quote unquote easier.
Yeah. And I think my biggest takeaway from this conversation is realizing that your wife is a student of you. That is, for me, like groundbreaking. Not that I didn't know that our relationship caters to her having to learn how I behave, how I interact with certain things and all that, but to actually say it out loud, I think brings a different perspective to problems, right? And not only does it say to me that, my wife is observing, but it also means that I can bring things to her and she'll know enough about me to help me work through it. She'll know what I need to hear, know what motivates me,
That
right?
part.
That is crazy. So, with that, I'm going to just sit here and think on it.
Yeah. It's good to want to be better, acknowledge that you need to be better, and let your wife in on the process of getting better. So, with that, thanks for sitting with us through this episode. If you agree or disagree, hit us up on social searching Marriage is Tougher. Let us know your thoughts on acknowledging being better. If you've had any ways that has worked for you or haven't worked for you in the past. Or you can go over to marriagestougher.com, click the contact form, and get in contact with us that way. Either way, we'd love to hear from you, further the conversation, and bring anything that is said and shared up on the pod and have another conversation of it. So, like, share, subscribe, comment wherever you're listening, whether Apple Music, Spotify, or on YouTube. We appreciate you all. Have a great day. We'll check you later.
Peace.